I exposed harsh cheating mockery, rebuilt my life in strategic silence, executed a full exit plan, and watched the one who belittled me collapse alone. I mean, how small are we talking? The question cut through the hallway like a scalpel, sharp and almost gleeful. The laughter that followed wasn't polite. It was the kind people let out when they know no one who matters is listening. The kind that's mean for sport. Mark stood in the darkened hallway, hands still damp from the sink. He'd been washing the dishes after bringing out the cake like he always did. Like a good host, like a good husband. Plates still had frosting on them. His fingers smelled like vanilla, her favorite. He wasn't supposed to hear it. He wasn't supposed to be there. They say size doesn't matter, slurred Tanya, the friend who wore her blouse 2 buttons too low and always touched Mark's shoulder just a little too long at barbecues. But come on, girl. You can't tell me you've never, you know. Oh, I know, his wife said, and then she laughed, hard. Let's just say if I wanted to be disappointed, I'd ask him to fix the garbage disposal again. They howled, every single one of them. Mark didn't flinch, not outwardly, but inside, somewhere just behind his ribs, something ancient and calm and terrifying cracked. She had always joked too loud, always drank too much at her own parties. But this was performance. He knew what that laugh meant. It wasn't just drunk cackling, it was punctuation, a signal. She wanted to entertain. She wanted them to hear it. And the worst part, no one defended him. Not even the woman who promised to grow old with him. She doesn't mean that. One of them mumbled weakly. But his wife, his partner, just doubled down. Oh, don't worry, he's sweet, reliable, great with taxes, just... Let's say I fake sleep more than I fake anything else. The room howled again. Eyes clinked against glasses. Someone put on music. Mark stood still in that hallway for another full minute. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because he already knew. He looked at the wall calendar beside the coat rack. A photo of them from last fall, apple picking in Vermont. She was smiling. He was looking at her. He remembered that day. She'd made fun of his boots, said he looked like a farmer, but he'd smiled, carried her thermos, and made her laugh by slipping on a rotten apple. She hadn't smiled like that in months. Maybe longer. He opened the drawer next to the shoe bench, pulled out his car keys, and grabbed his coat. The dog, old, gray, quiet, lifted his head from the rug but didn't get up. She doesn't even know I'm leaving, Mark whispered. He rubbed behind the dog's ear. You're smarter than she is. He didn't write a note. He didn't slam the door. He didn't even look back. He stepped outside. The cold night air hit his lungs like a bucket of water. From inside, the music grew louder. Laughter bounced against the windows. She thought she was the star of the night. She had no idea the story had just changed. The first thing she noticed when she woke up was the silence. Not just the absence of Mark snoring or the usual clink of his coffee mug in the kitchen. This was a different kind of silence, hollow, suspicious. There were no wet footprints outside the shower. His side of the bed was perfectly made, like no one had slept in it. His toothbrush still dry. She sat up, groggy, rubbing the mascara smear off her cheek with the back of her hand. Her birthday sash lay crumpled on the floor beside an empty bottle of Prosecco. Her phone buzzed. A group text from Tanya with blurry photos of the night before. In one, she was mid-laugh, holding a wine glass like a trophy, eyes wild. She didn't even remember the moment being taken. Still no message from Mark. That was odd. He was dependable like clockwork. Morning kisses, check-ins, good-natured sarcasm over burnt toast. Routine things, comforting things. Things that shouldn't just vanish overnight. She scrolled through her texts. Nothing. Not even a passive-aggressive thumbs up. She checked the front door. Locked. His shoes gone. His wallet tray on the credenza empty. Maybe he went to the store. Maybe to his brother's. Maybe. She dialed his number. Ring, ring, click. A woman's voice. Not rushed, not unfamiliar, but deliberate, crisp, a tone that carried weight. Mark can't talk right now. Who's this? It wasn't an assistant. It wasn't customer service. It wasn't a relative. Her throat tightened. I'm his wife. There was a pause on the other end, not awkward, calculating, like someone mentally weighing how much rope to give. Then a click. No goodbye, no explanation, no name. She stared at her phone, her reflection warping in the black screen with her pulse. She called again, straight to voicemail. She texted, "Who was that? Where are you? This isn't funny. Mark, answer me." Nothing. She checked the Find My iPhone app, disabled. Location sharing had been shut off sometime between midnight and 3 a.m. She looked around the house with fresh eyes now. The suit jacket he wore to nice dinners, gone. The watch she gave him on their anniversary, not on the dresser. She opened the hallway closet. His leather duffel. Missing. It hit her then. He hadn't stormed out in a rage. He hadn't slammed the door like in those stupid rom-coms. He had planned this. She sat down on the edge of the couch, numb fingers gripping her phone, replaying the voice. The woman had sounded calm, in control, territorial even. Mark didn't have women like that in his life. Did he? She scrolled to Tanya's number, almost texted her, then stopped. What would she even say? Hey, remember when we all laughed about my husband's dick? Now he's missing and another woman is answering his phone. She threw the phone across the couch. It bounced once, landed face down. The clock on the wall ticked like a metronome. She stared at the front door. He had walked through it 100 times. But this time, he didn't leave breadcrumbs. And whoever answered that phone, she wasn't some accident. She was a door slamming shut. By noon, she was spiraling. She called his office twice, straight to voicemail both times. No auto-reply, no receptionist, no trace. Mark always answered. Even during meetings, he'd shoot back a text. Busy. You alive or just bored? Not today. She tried his brother next. Carl, the one who always sounded halfway into a six-pack, even on Sunday mornings. Hey, Carl, is Mark there? A pause. Then, nope. That was it. Carl sighed. Look, I don't know where he is. If I did, I'd tell you. Maybe, probably, depends. Depends on what? On whether you're calling to find him or to fix whatever the hell last night was. 'Cause from what I heard, that wasn't exactly your proudest moment. Click. She stared at the screen. Her own brother-in-law had just hung up on her. It wasn't just that Mark was gone. It was that everyone around him seemed prepared for his absence. No one seemed shocked. No one was asking, where is he? Just her. She paced the kitchen, staring at the vase of limp flowers from her party, the remnants of a joke that had cost her more than a laugh. So she got in the car. Mark's workshop was 20 minutes out, tucked behind a row of industrial buildings, the kind of place that smelled like old wood, sawdust, and oil-stained coffee mugs. It had been his sanctuary, his escape. He used to joke that it was the only place he could breathe without being edited. Now it was empty. The gate was locked, windows dark, no tools on the walls, no scrap wood on the benches, just a faint square on the wall or a picture used to hang. Him and his dad holding a newly built oak table. Gone. She sat in the driver's seat, engine running, hands gripping the wheel so hard her knuckles went white. Then she saw it. His car. Not parked outside the shop, but down by the old gas station at the town's edge. The one with the half-lit, open sign and a vending machine that still sold glass bottles of Coke. She pulled in slowly, heart jackhammering. It was his license plate, his bumper sticker, the cracked rear taillight from that fender bender last fall. It was his car. And then she saw him, standing beside it, wearing that navy blue jacket she always said made him look like a professor. He was leaning against the hood, arms folded, laughing, not smiling, laughing, at something a woman beside him had said. The woman was maybe mid-50s, sharp pantsuit, silver-streaked hair pulled back tight, the kind of woman who read contracts for fun and drank her bourbon neat. They were standing close, too close. He reached out, touched her elbow gently as she spoke. That familiar gesture he always used when someone had his full attention, the one he used on her before. It knocked the breath from her lungs. He didn't look sad, didn't look angry, didn't look like a man licking his wounds. He looked free. She ducked behind her steering wheel like a coward, heart slamming against her ribs. This wasn't about him running. This wasn't about cooling off. This was replacement. And the worst part wasn't that he had found someone else. The worst part was realizing he hadn't just found her. He had already started building something with her. Long before the cake was cut. Long before the first bottle of wine was uncorked last night. She'd mocked a man who had already let go. And now she was the one hiding in her car, watching from a distance as he laughed without her. She started the engine. She didn't even know where she was driving. But she knew one thing. That image, him with her. That was going to haunt her longer than any voicemail ever could. Exactly 7 days after the party, a small padded envelope arrived at the door. No signature required, no courier smile. Just dropped into the mailbox like it was any other Thursday. Her name wasn't on it. It was addressed to Mark the Fifth Lansing. She stared at it for a moment too long. Something about the clean typeface and precise formatting set off a quiet alarm in her chest. The return address wasn't familiar. Not a store, not a family member. It was a law firm, not local. She brought it inside, sat at the dining table, and turned it over in her hands. Still sealed, still clean, like Mark himself had signed off on its perfection. She hesitated. A pang of guilt flickered. Was this legal to open? Then another voice in her head spoke louder. He walked out. He's not here. He forfeited that courtesy when he let another woman answer his damn phone. She tore the top off and slid the contents onto the table. No letter, just a single thick envelope stamped with a gold-embossed emblem, Broden and Marsh LLP, Estate and Trust Advisory. She opened it slowly. Inside was a document, 3 pages, stapled, formal, neat. The first line stopped her cold. This notice is to confirm that Mr. Mark the Fifth Lansing's primary mailing and legal correspondence address has been transferred to the following entity: MV Holdings Trust, P.O. Box 1168, Windermere, Washington 99208. In MV, Mark's initials. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the page. She skimmed further. Words like private entity, asset protection, property transfer, mail redirect floated past her eyes like confetti made of glass. There was nothing hostile in the tone, nothing angry, just clinical precision. He'd moved everything. Not just his physical body, not just his toothbrush and jeans, but his identity, through a trust. Her Mark, the man who once asked her how to refill a printer cartridge, the guy who needed 3 tries to set up their Netflix password, the man she joked couldn't strategize his way out of a salad bar, had formed a trust, had moved legal assets into it, had hired lawyers. She stared at the address again. Windermere, not a town she recognized, not in their county, not in their life. Her eyes darted to the kitchen calendar, still on last month, still with the party date circled in pink marker. She flipped it to the next page. Blank. No dinner with the Thompsons. No doctor appointments. No business trips. Mark was off the grid. Not in panic. In preparation. A sudden urge hit her. She went to his desk drawer, the one he never locked. Empty. Not just cleared out, organized. The paper clips were gone. The drawer liner wiped clean. She yanked open the filing cabinet. Half the folders gone. And the ones left. Pointless. Old receipts. Car registration from 3 years ago. A dentist appointment card from 2021. That's when her breath began to shorten. This wasn't a meltdown. It wasn't him reacting emotionally. It was a strategy. She thought she'd wounded him. Thought her words that night, those jokes, the smirking cruelty, might have fractured something fragile. She didn't realize she just confirmed something he already suspected, that she saw him as small. And now, standing in her quiet kitchen holding a document that said, Independent Trustee Approval Required, she realized something worse. He wasn't trying to get away from her. He was building a world where she simply didn't exist, where she didn't qualify. She pressed her hand against the marble counter to steady herself. The air felt thinner. The house, once shared, now echoed in places it never used to. She joked that night about being too much woman for one man, but now she wasn't even enough to warrant a courtesy call. He hadn't yelled. He hadn't cried. He just restructured and rebranded. It was supposed to be a reset, a low-key dinner, just 6 people, her safe circle. Friends who had toasted her birthday less than 2 weeks ago, who once clinked glasses at her house and called her hostess of the year. She told herself they'd understand, that things had just gotten out of hand. She planned it carefully, lit the good candles, set the table with the blue stoneware plates Mark always hated, cooked the chicken herself instead of ordering from the bistro down the street, even opened that bottle of red she'd been saving since Christmas. No drama, just warmth, or so she hoped. They arrived late, all of them. Not one person walked in with the usual peals of laughter or jokes about traffic. Tanya brought a bottle of wine but didn't hand it over with her usual wink. It just sat on the counter, unopened. Even the hugs felt staged, barely touching, a half step back immediately after. They sat, talked, but the conversation was flat, too measured. Like everyone had been briefed not to make eye contact with the elephant in the room, or in this case, the very obvious absence of the man who used to crack jokes from the kitchen and pour wine like he was hosting a cooking show. "He's out of town," she offered, unprompted. No one asked, just a polite nod from Rachel. And silence after. Appetizers came and went. Salad, too. It was during the main course, over a stiff silence broken only by silverware, that Diane finally spoke. "You know," she said, placing her fork down, "what you did at your party." Everyone looked up. Diane's voice was calm, measured, but her eyes were glassy. That wasn't funny. Her mouth opened to respond, but the words snagged in her throat. She hadn't prepared for this. "It was just a joke," she managed, voice thinner than she intended. "I mean, we were drinking, we were all—" "No," Diane interrupted, "you were laughing. The rest of us just didn't know how to stop you without making it worse." Tanya set down her wine glass a little too hard. "And Mark." "He was in the hallway," Diane added. "He heard everything. You knew that, right?" The room froze. Even the dog curled under the table lifted its head. She tried to smile. It didn't land. "I didn't think he'd— I mean, we joke all the time. He knows I don't—" "You humiliated him," Rachel said quietly, cutting her off. "And you didn't even flinch. You just laughed louder." Someone coughed. Someone stood. Chairs scraped tile. Napkins folded. No dessert was touched. Within 10 minutes they were all gone. No lingering goodbyes. No offers to help with dishes. No "let's do this again soon." She stood in the kitchen, staring at the untouched cherry tart on the counter. The whipped cream she'd made from scratch started to collapse, melting into itself. She opened her phone. No texts from any of them. She refreshed her feed. No likes on the dinner photo she'd posted earlier, not even a pity emoji. She tapped Tanya's name. The message thread stopped exactly 1 week ago. The last text was a party photo, her arm around Mark, captioned, "You two are disgustingly adorable." Nothing. She clicked on Rachel's contact. A message bubble hovered, typing, then vanished. She didn't hit send. Because what could she possibly say? That it was just a joke? That she didn't mean anything? That the man she'd spent 2 decades with didn't deserve to take one bad night so seriously? Except he hadn't made it about one night. He had made it a referendum. And it seemed everyone else had quietly voted. She slid the tart into the trash. Listened to it hit the bottom with a sickening splat. Even the food didn't want to stay. It was taped to the door, half slipping from the edges where condensation had loosened the cheap blue painter's tape. At first she assumed it was just another maintenance notice. Maybe something about water pressure or garbage bins, but the header was in bold, all caps, and formal. Notice, leaseholder has been updated. Contact new property management for access or inquiries. Her heart gave a slow, confused thump. She peeled it off, reread it. Then again, the wording was too vague to make sense, and yet sharp enough to cut something deep. Leaseholder has been updated. Updated to whom? She hadn't signed anything. She hadn't requested a change. She unlocked the door with slightly trembling fingers, walked straight to the kitchen, and dialed the landlord's number from the magnet on the fridge. His name was Tony. She'd always thought he looked like the kind of guy who ate cold cuts standing up in his garage. He answered on the second ring. "Tony, it's Julia, apartment 3B, she said quickly. "What is this notice on my door about the leaseholder changing?" There was a pause on his end, a faint rustling. She pictured him pulling up a file, chewing on a pen. "Oh yeah," he said. "That was processed last week." "Processed? What the hell does that mean?" "I live here." "Well, not on paper," Tony replied, voice uncomfortable now. Mark Lansing filed the transfer. New leaseholder is EV Holdings through a management proxy, corporate handoff. Her breath caught. He can't just do that. Actually, he can. His name was the only one on the lease. "No, wait. We both live here. I've lived here for 8 years. We share this apartment." He sighed, like a man who'd had this conversation before. Maybe not today, but in some other version, with some other woman who didn't see the slow wave coming. "Listen, I'm not trying to be rude, okay? But Mark signed the original lease. Utilities are in his name, so is the deposit. He handled all payments. Technically, you were listed as CO occupant. That's not the same thing as leaseholder." Her voice dropped into a low, ragged whisper. "So what? You're saying I don't live here?" "I'm saying," Tony said slowly, "that legally, this place isn't yours." Click. She dropped the phone on the counter and stared around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. The place was spotless. Her doing, The bar stools were the exact ones she'd picked from a design catalog, the curtains, custom ordered, the wine rack on the wall, her idea. None of it mattered. None of it was hers. She opened the hallway closet in a daze. A few of his jackets still hung there, quiet, untouched, like decoys. She yanked open the bottom drawer. Gone. The documents folder, the one she always stuffed full of receipts and old leases and bills, had vanished. She opened the bedroom closet. That's when it hit her. The slight shift in space. The hangers spaced out a little more than usual. Her shoe rack slightly skewed, like it had been nudged. The top shelf where his winter coats used to sit, empty. She walked into the bathroom. The top drawer where his razor and deodorant lived now held only her things, carefully rearranged to fill the void. He hadn't left a mess. He'd left a vacancy. Strategic, quiet, unmistakable. She opened the fridge. No more almond milk. No more blueberry yogurt. His protein shakes, gone. But the fridge was full. Not empty. Full of her food. Almost like she'd been curated. She stood in the center of the living room, barefoot, suddenly aware of how much of the apartment wasn't hers. The lease, the utilities, the foundation. She had spent years decorating a place that was only hers in decoration. The illusion of belonging had just been ripped away, clean, surgical. Her safe space reassigned, her home rebranded. And the man she mocked like a harmless sidekick was now erasing her like a smudge on a lease agreement. She sat on the couch, his old recliner now gone, leaving a gap in the room, and stared at the space like a stranger. Because that's exactly what she was. She was already on edge when she walked into the office that Monday. The weekend had been a fog of half-slept hours, unanswered texts, and the ever-present hum of dread. Her inbox was stacked with polite check-ins from clients. Her calendar marked with meetings she no longer had the emotional bandwidth to fake her way through. Still, she'd shown up. Power suit, hair pinned back, smile stapled on. By 10:15, she got the email. Subject, please stop by my office at your earliest convenience. E. Carryle. Eric Carroll, her direct supervisor. Middle-aged, genial, spreadsheet-obsessed. The kind of guy who wore Dockers to the Christmas party and brought gluten-free muffins to staff meetings. He'd never summoned her before. She paused outside his door, checked her reflection in the wall-mounted fire extinguisher glass, then knocked. Come in, he said without looking up. She stepped inside. He motioned to the seat across from him. She sat. Eric folded his hands, glanced at his monitor, then back at her. Julia, your name came up in a background scan. She blinked. What kind of scan? Reputation monitoring. PR fallout detection. It's standard for employees in client-facing roles. We work with sensitive accounts, government contracts, finance. Anything that might show up on social media, we get flagged. She crossed her legs tightly. And what came up? Eric turned his monitor slightly so she could see. It was an article, no byline, posted on some minimalist site with a gray header and no comment section. Anonymous but surgical. The joke that cost her everything. When the wife of a prominent consultant turned a birthday into a public humiliation. Her eyes scanned the screen faster than her brain could keep up. The quotes were paraphrased, not exact, but the implication was clear. It described a drunken birthday gathering where the hostess turned a private moment into a public display of cruelty toward her spouse, mocking his body, his value, and their intimacy while guests watched and laughed. No names, but details. Oh, the details were enough. The husband, a respected small business owner, had vanished quietly from the event and subsequently transferred all holdings to a legal trust within 72 hours. She felt the blood drain from her face. Eric didn't move, just waited. That's someone's exaggeration, she said, trying to keep her voice from shaking. It's gossip. Trash. Anyone could have written that. He nodded slowly. But our PR firm cross-referenced timeline data with social posts, he said. And there's overlap. One of our partner's spouses was at the party. Apparently it's been shared around. Oh God, her voice sharpened. This has nothing to do with my work. That would be easier to argue, Eric said gently, if you weren't married to someone who's now registered as a trustee for a mid-cap consulting holding with direct links to 3 of our competitors. She stared at him. That's what Mark Lansing, MV Holdings, Winmere. It felt like she'd been slapped. Eric leaned forward. We have to open a formal review. HR will contact you this week. Until then, I'd advise against any external communication or social media activity. And I'd strongly recommend a statement of clarification. I didn't do anything illegal, she snapped. He didn't flinch. That's not what this is about. It's about perception, about judgment, about who people trust to handle million-dollar contracts. She wanted to scream. Wanted to tell him it was one stupid night, that she was drunk, that she didn't mean any of it, that Mark always took things too personally. But even as the thoughts formed, she saw the truth in his face. This wasn't about Mark anymore. This was about her. The woman who mocked her husband like a party trick. The woman who didn't notice him leave. The woman who laughed too loud and too long. And now she wasn't just losing him. She was bleeding credibility in front of the one place that still respected her. As she walked out of Eric's office, past the glass-walled conference room and down the hallway, she caught eyes turning away, conversations dipping in volume. She didn't need to ask. She was the story now, the one nobody was defending. She didn't plan to follow the car, not consciously. But when she spotted it again, Mark's Volvo, same cracked taillight, same damn pine-scented air freshener swaying from the mirror, it felt like fate had given her one last thread to pull. She trailed it across 2 neighborhoods, past the city limits, down a tree-lined access road that looked more like the entry to a private estate than anything on a GPS grid. She parked a safe distance behind, watched. He stepped out first, not hurried, not hiding, wearing a pressed blazer, sunglasses, holding a manila folder tucked under one arm like he was headed to a board meeting. And then she stepped out, the woman from the phone. Not young, not flashy, but polished, charcoal pencil skirt, fitted white blouse, hair swept up like a corporate weapon. Calm and controlled in the way that screamed competence. Julia waited until Mark disappeared into the glass building up ahead, something sleek and anonymous with no obvious signage, before she got out of her car. Her heels clacked too loud on the pavement, her mouth dry. She approached with the flailing confidence of someone who hadn't slept but still thought indignation could win a debate. The woman noticed her instantly, didn't flinch, just turned, one eyebrow arching slightly. "You're Julia," she said. "Not a question." "And you're what?" Julia snapped. "His rebound?" The woman didn't blink. "I'm his accountant," she said evenly, "and his attorney, and his longtime consultant, also his friend." Her voice was smooth as marble, controlled, with just a hint of amusement under the surface, like she'd dealt with women like Julia before. "Minnie, probably," Julia said. "You answered his phone." "That wasn't professional," the woman replied. "I was being clear." There was a pause. Julia tried to hold her ground, but the other woman had the calm of someone invited into the inner circle, while she stood fuming outside the gate. Then the woman pulled something from her handbag, a white envelope. No stamp, just Julia's name in familiar cursive across the front. Mark's handwriting. She held it out, not aggressively, just patiently. Julia took it slowly. "I assume he's still too much of a gentleman to say it out loud," the woman said, voice softening a notch. "So he wrote it down." Julia opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside, a single sheet of paper. One sentence. "You didn't break me. You revealed yourself." That was it. No signature, no rant. Just that. For a second, Julia couldn't breathe. The words were too simple, too cold, too true. They held the weight of 100 tiny observations she thought had gone unnoticed over the years. Comments made in passing, dismissive laughs, careless jabs dressed as humor. She looked up, eyes burning. "This is revenge." "No," the woman replied. "This is structure." She tucked the envelope back into her bag, turned slightly, paused. "You thought he was soft because he didn't shout, because he didn't correct you in public, because he didn't measure his manhood in volume or posture." She met Julia's eyes, calm, direct. "But here's the truth. You mocked the wrong man." And then she walked away, just like that. No dramatic exit, no lingering gloat. Julia stood alone on the sidewalk, clutching a letter that weighed more than any legal document she'd ever signed. Because in that one line, Mark hadn't just ended the conversation. He had erased the version of him she thought she knew, and all that was left was silence. She ironed the tablecloth twice, lit every candle, set the table the way she used to when she still cared if the forks matched. White plates, real napkins, the bottle of wine he always pretended to hate but quietly finished. The playlist was soft jazz, something neutral, sincere without being dramatic. Because tonight wasn't about performance. Tonight was the apology. The real one. She rehearsed it under her breath as she chopped shallots. I was cruel. I let a moment of ego humiliate a man I never deserved. I thought mocking made me strong. It didn't. It just made me small. The roast was in the oven, potatoes golden, salad crisp, everything perfect, down to the stupid water glasses with the etched rims they got as a wedding gift from someone neither of them liked. She checked the clock. 6:35. By 6:50, she was pacing. At 7:10, she reapplied lipstick. At 7:35, she poured herself a glass of wine. At 7:50, she texted, "Dinner's ready. Please come. I just want to talk." No reply. She tried again. "Please. You don't have to say anything. Just listen. Just let me explain." Still nothing. At 8:14, her phone buzzed. A message from Mark. Just one line. "I have nothing left to say, but you'll understand everything by Monday." No period, no punctuation, nothing else. She read it 3 times. The words weren't angry, weren't dismissive, weren't cruel. They were worse. They were final. She didn't eat, didn't clean. Just sat at the head of the table, staring at the candles as they burned lower. The wax formed little halos of grief around each base. She texted again, desperate now. "What's happening Monday?" No answer. The wind outside shifted, rustling the blinds. She moved from the table to the couch, then back to the table, picked up her phone, put it down, Googled his new company name, searched public filings, looked for anything that might explain the message. Nothing, except that gnawing sensation, the one that had taken root since the day she heard that woman's voice on his phone. This wasn't spontaneous. It was timed, calculated. You'll understand everything by Monday. She didn't sleep. At 1:14 a.m., she sat on the floor of the hallway and stared at the scuff marks on the baseboard where his briefcase used to bump against the wall. At 2:09, she opened the fridge and drank wine straight from the bottle. By 3:26, she was scrolling through old texts, years of them. His little notes, his dry jokes, his gentle nudges when she was spiraling. Things she forgot to appreciate. Messages that once felt unremarkable now read like a slow, aching love letter, one she never bothered to answer. By dawn, the roast had collapsed into itself in the cold oven. The candles were long dead. The apartment smelled like meat, wax, and regret. And Mark, he hadn't just skipped dinner. He had chosen not to see her again, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to retrieve. And whatever Monday held, she already knew it wouldn't be forgiveness. It would be the consequence. Monday arrived like judgment. She hadn't slept. Her eyes burned. Her hands shook pouring coffee she didn't drink. The roast still sat on the counter in a foil-wrapped tomb, untouched, the only witness to her failed redemption. By 9 o'clock a.m., she was already in the car, not dressed for work, dressed for answers. Windermere wasn't far, a 30-minute drive on a straight road that somehow felt like a tunnel. She didn't even fully understand what she was doing. Only that she had to see something, needed to confirm the nightmare had a shape, a name, a boundary. She pulled up outside the law firm. Only it wasn't just a law firm anymore. She blinked twice. The plaque outside had changed, polished brass, brand new. MV Holdings, Legal Advisory and Consulting. Underneath, in smaller, unflinching letters, Founder, Mark V. Lansing. She stared. The name, his name, not shared, not hyphenated, not buried at the bottom of a board. Founder. The word punched a hole through her gut. She got out of the car, almost dazed. Her heels clicked on the pavement too fast. Her breath fogged in the early chill. Hands bare. Hair knotted. She looked like a woman who'd been left behind by time, by dignity, by her own choices. Then the doors opened, and he stepped out. Mark, in a tailored charcoal suit, cuffs clean, watch glinting. Not overdressed, not performative, just composed, certain. He didn't carry papers or a briefcase. He didn't need to. Beside him, her, the woman from before, his lawyer, friend, Allie. She said something low. Mark smirked, just slightly, and nodded. They turned to walk toward a sleek black sedan idling by the curb. And then he saw her. Or maybe he already had. But this time his eyes met hers. Only for a breath. Then he looked past her. No anger, no triumph, just peace. The kind of peace a man wears after finishing a marathon everyone said he was too weak to run. She took a step forward. Her voice caught. Nothing came out. Not wait, not please, not even why. Because she already knew the answer. She had mocked him to feel taller. She had let people laugh at the man who loved her most. And when he stood in that hallway hearing every word, he didn't shout, didn't slam doors, didn't retaliate. He rebuilt, in silence, in steel, in trust agreements and business filings. In every little place she assumed he was incapable of reaching. He got in the car. She stood frozen. And as the sedan pulled away, his window rolled down just enough. He didn't wave, didn't speak. But the corner of his mouth lifted, barely. Because this was never about revenge. This was never about rage. It was about dignity. And hers, she sold it cheap for a punchline. He never had to destroy her. He just walked away and let her live with what was left.